who is going to own our information? I mean, at the moment, as you mentioned Google, I trust Google with quite a bit of information. Is it the government? Here in Australia, particularly during COVID, our government introduced what we call a MyGov ID, and that's how we get our vaccination certificates in the particular states. Here in New South Wales, where I live, we have digital driver's licenses, which are extremely common now. Now that you've got obviously your credit cards on your phone, you've got your driver's license on your phone, you've got your vaccination status on your phone, you really don't need to carry a wallet anymore. So who's going to control our information?
Well, ultimately, you will control it, and you should control it.
Yep.
Right? As an individual, you should control it. You should be in control of the information. Let's just park the conversation perhaps about Australia for later, and I would just mention Australia is right up there and Australia and New Zealand right up there with great identity implementations right now. Connect ID in Australia is a one to watch.
Yep.
Huge opportunity. It's not 100. It's not decentralized. It's not SSI yet, but it is going that way. And we had in the hospitality and travel sitting under DIF, we had a great presentation from Connect ID, and really good one to watch there. So, but maybe what we do is we just kind of unpack some of the terminology and the technology underneath, because I think it's important that we understand. So when you say identity, everybody thinks they understand the word identity, but actually nobody understands really what it is, right? So it's one of those obvious words, right?
Yeah.
So what is identity? Well, at an individual level, it's a random and large collection of things that I choose to associate with me, right? And it's cumulative typically, and it's changing all the time. I'm adding things to it. I may be removing a few things from it as well, but it's essentially the digital baggage in this case, or the baggage, the attributes behind a thing called an identifier. Right. So today, what is an identifier? Right. And this is the issue. Yep. What is an identifier? So if I said, well, what is your identity? Some people say it's a passport. Some people would say, oh, I'm British, or I'm Australian. I mean, it's difficult.
Yep.
In the digital world, your identity is often brendan@gmail.com.
Yes.
Or nick@apple.com, or God forbid, brendan@facebook.com, right?
No,
and right. And so when you hide behind those, which they perform a service, but they come as a service with a cost, right? And the important thing is that what you're doing is you are for convenience purposes, you're simply saying Facebook knows me, that you want to buy shoes from, right? In lieu of setting up an account directly with the shoe company, or an account with the shoe company.
Yep.
But many of us still have that as well. So we have, God forbid, my wife, a long Excel sheet. Some of us use LastPass or all those kind of things.
Yes.
That's a symptom of a problem, right? True. That's a symptom of a problem, because the real world isn't like that, and the internet should never have been like that. It wasn't conceived in that way. The internet was created as an interconnection of corporate networks, right? And so I was nick@company.com. And so it became very obvious that, when we started using browsers and we started connecting to internet providers, we became nick@internetprovider.com, right? And then when we wanted to buy shoes, we used nick@internet.com to create an account in this shoe company, right? But the problem is today, we've got 5,000 accounts, right? Nobody knows what they are. So problem statement, let's focus on travel and hospitality. Stop me if you think I'm talking too much, because I can go on forever. But travel and hospitality, very real example here. So in a physical world example, right? In your physical travel wallet, how many travel loyalty cards do you have?
Too many to fit in the wallet. So I normally take a couple, and the rest of them are just sitting in a pile in a drawer.
Yeah. So they're 20, 30, 40, something like that. A lot of people have that kind of number.
About 20.
So I don't know when the last time you changed address was, but probably in the last 10 years. Did you update any of those accounts
Nope.
with your new change address?
No.
So what does that actually tell you? So the first problem statement is if your address is a fairly critical piece of PII,
Yep.
right? It's a fairly fundamental thing that in certain cases you'd want to tell people, right? And all of those accounts require you to have an address, pretty much.
Yep.
Right? Most of them do, because most of them want you to associate credit cards and so on with it. And you can't be bothered, right, to update it, because actually it's physically impossible to do it. You don't have enough time in the day to manage all these things, right? Yeah. So what does that also tell you? It tells you that you're not invested in providing up-to-date information about you. What happens if you become a vegetarian? Are you going to tell them all? Right? Or all of a sudden you like a high floor in a hotel, or you never want to travel on a Sunday, or whatever it is. Doesn't really matter, right? My favorite food is this. You're not going to change. You're not going to tell 40 different travel loyalty programs that you have something important to you has changed. Yep. And so they aren't doing a good job of capturing attributes that comprise real world identity, right? They're not doing a good job at all. And because they're not doing a good job, the people who are behind them, which is the hotelier or the airline, they actually want to know these things because they want to give you a good service, right? They want to respond to your individual needs, but they don't have the information. So the model is wrong, right? The model is wrong. And what is the model? The model is the fact that because the internet grew up in the way it grew up, we have agreed for convenience to not be an identity, not be Nick, but we be Nick at the shoe company, Nick at the hotel company, Nick at the airline company, Nick at the retail company, and Nick at the bank, and all of these things. And every single one of them is different. We have completely innocently screwed ourselves, basically. And the important thing to realize, and I'll come on to the technology in a minute and how we actually fix it, but the important thing to realize is that it's not a static world, right? We're not finished. It doesn't stop. The world that we have today with 200 of these accounts, or however many you have, isn't going to be 210 years' time. Because as more and more and more commerce becomes digital, and our dependence on that commerce becomes digital, it won't be 200, it'll be 1,000 or more. So we have a real and growing problem to fix, right? And yeah, there may well be companies out there that say, you know what, I can create an identity, just give me all your information and I'll make that great for you. I would be cautious about that, right? You know, do I really want to trust Google with very, very important personal information, knowing Google's business model? Even Apple, would I want to give this information to Apple? You know, possibly not, right? Because even if I did give it to Apple, it wouldn't get to all the places I want it to go. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about a fundamental model shift, right? So the model shift is from a fragmented model, which paradoxically we call a centralized model, where the information is central. I know, don't ask me why. Central to the shoe shop, or central to the hotel company, or central to the airline. We're talking about a model shift, and we're shifting it around where the information is central to me. Right. And by the way, me could also be a company, right? Or it could be a company, but that information is with me. And in order for it to be with me, I need a place for it to be, and we'll come back to what that is. We need a representation of what that information, the structure of that information, schemas and structures to be able to hold that information. We need standards to describe it and protocols to get access to it. And most importantly, we need an identifier that all this information can sit behind, so that you can get to me and I can give you an identifier like a business card, and I can say this is Nick, and you know that it's Nick. And the identifier is not my Gmail email address, right? It's not even nick@internet.com email address. It's not an email address at all.
Is this
It
a MAC
can't be.
address? Are we going to get a?
No,
everybody's going to get a.
No, because when you do that, you change your phone, your MAC address changes. No, it's not.
It's true. Do we get a human MAC address when we're born?
Yes, we do. It's effectively, yes. That's exactly what it is. It's an address for life.
Yep.
Right. Address for life, or you could have multiples of them if you wanted to. There's no one saying you can only have one, but it would make sense in our world, at least in travel, if you said Brendan's travel is behind one address, and you probably want it to do more than that.
Yep.
It's called a decentralized identifier, a DID.
Okay. DID. Yep.
And conceptually, that's actually quite a simple thing, and it's designed to be simple because it needs to be exchanged between people. It's like a business card, right? So it's what we call
DID for each individual.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a unique identifier, and it's a URI. It's a text string that looks somewhat like a web address. Not the same, but somewhat like. It starts with DID, and it has various components of this address, but basically it's a text string, and it is unique. And the important thing about that text string is it actually maps to something.
Right.
So it represents, it's a physical textual representation of an identifier. The identifier itself actually is a public-private key pair, right? So now we're starting to talk about cryptography.
Yes.
Right, and this is the missing component. Talked about a missing component. The internet was born without an identity layer, or PKI, public key cryptography. Yep. Decentralized public key cryptography is the technology that underpins this capability. It's the technology that allows you, when I give you my identifier, it allows you to know with absolute certainty that this is Nick. Yep. And it allows me to know with absolute certainty that that's Brendan, right? So let's just unpack that a little bit further. We go down the stack a bit. So we have this identifier. We have a private public key. Well, I'll come back to the private key in a minute. You need the public key. The public key needs to be stored somewhere. And this is where, if you've heard something about decentralized digital identity and self-sovereignty at all,
yep,
you probably heard about blockchains.
Yes.
Or decentralized or distributed ledgers or decentralized ledgers.
Yep.
We need certain attributes and certain functions. And in fact, it's true to say that the decentralized digital identity capability came about because of the creation of blockchains, which provided certain functionalities that are really important to us, certain capabilities, the capabilities of immutability, to be able to write something to a blockchain and it for not to be erased, the capability to record the time at which something happened, right? This in the record, and with absolute certainty be able to know that this record is the record that you believe it is, and the ability to be able to find it, right? So find the record. So on the blockchain, you essentially have a DID that maps to a record, right? A DID that maps to a record. And in that record, there is a public key that represents me. Yep. And there is a thing called a DID document. And that DID document is actually, it can be a very tiny document, can be quite a large document. What it does is it describes what we call service endpoints, places you can go to find out more information about me.
Okay.
Right? Because what we don't want to do is store private personal information on the blockchain. It would be a very inefficient data structure and storage structure on which to store that type of information. And there is a fundamental difference between the sort of cryptocurrency world that we're talking about and some things that you may have heard about, the kind of chains that are in that world and this world. We don't want this information to be on the chain. So you don't want me to put my PI on the chain, because actually the chain is probably public anyway. Right. What you want is to find a public key and to locate these service endpoints where my information actually is. So the DID allows you to find the record. The record gives you a public key and a DID document, which contains a bunch of service endpoints. With that information, with that public key, you can issue a challenge to me, right?
Okay.
This is standard PKI. You can say, Nick, prove to me that this key is yours. I then have a private key. The private key is in a wallet that I contain, digital wallet, and I simply sign your challenge.
Okay.
Right? And that basic piece of cryptography proves without any doubt that you are you, I am me, right? And the important thing is all the information, or a vast amount of the information, not necessarily all of it, but a significant part of the information that we're going to talk about in a minute that you want to prove is actually signed by those keys, right? So when I send you a piece of information, I'm sending you a piece of information that is signed by my private key, right? It cannot come from somebody else,
Right.
right? And we'll unpack that a little bit more in a second. So cryptography is the big difference here. It's the fundamental enabler, along with ledgers. It's a fundamental enabler that enables me to have a digitally provable identifier for life, and enables you to have the same.
Yep.
So we got this thing called a DID, but we need to do other things with it. So we started talking about a driver's license or a passport,
Yeah.
but maybe we should talk about a hotel reservation or an airline boarding pass or those kind of things, because they're equally documents that you need to prove, right? And when we say prove, it's kind of present. You're presenting a piece of information to somebody else. So how to represent those pieces of information? Because those pieces of information have come from some other party. They're not created by me. They've been given to me.
Yeah.
And that's where we have this triangular relationship between a document issuer, in this case, an airline or a driving license bureau,
Yep.
a holder or subject, that's me,
Yep.
and a verifier to whom I want to give that piece of information to. Now, the important thing is, in this triangle, each one of those entities has this public-private key, right? So and they sign this information. So I have now been given a digital driver's license, right? That driver's license as what we call a verifiable credential format. That driver's license is signed by the issuer, the driver's license bureau, is provable to be a type driver's license, is provable that it was issued to me.
Yep.
I am now sending it to you, and you can prove that I am me, right? And I know that I'm sending it to you because I know who you are.
Okay.
The important thing is that when you receive that digital driver's license, you don't have to call up or digitally connect to the driver's license bureau to verify it.
Yep.
Everything you need to verify is contained within the credential that I'm sending you, right? So you have the capability to verify and to prove to your satisfaction that I am me. I've sent you a driver's license. The driver's license is genuine. It was issued by the driver's bureau. The driver's license is valid, right?
Yep.
And you have not had to speak to the driver's license bureau to prove that. Okay, that is a huge, huge step forward, because it's when you have to do that what we call a phone home, that you get into B2B exchanges of information, and it makes the scalability of, in particular travel, the scalability of the information verification non-scalable. So I'll give you an example of what I mean.
Yeah.
A travel example. So you go to an airport, and quite often today, you've got a digital capability to get through the airport, your departure airport, onto a plane and into the arrival airport, and you can do it all with your phone. Then you get out there and you say, I want to use that same information in a taxi or at a hotel, right, or at a restaurant, and you can't. It's the same information you want to do, because in order for that flow to work, the company that's orchestrating the airport and has that data record of Brendan then needs to have a B2B contract with the taxi company, a B2B contract with the hotel, a B2B contract with the restaurant. And they then need to have the technology to connect to in a B2B fashion. And they need to be able to, subject to the GDPR, I'm passing two businesses exchanging information about a customer subject to GDPR, right? Because that information has not come from me. So much more complicated. In our world, I am giving you information about me. It's exactly like the world that we have today. Except where I give you a physical piece of information. It's implicit permission. I've given it to you. It hasn't come, there's no third party in a way. And that is the other difference here, is that the technology that underpins this is a peer-to-peer or P2P technology. It allows peer-to-peer communication. There is no intermediary. There doesn't need to be. So when I have a communication with you, I'm passing you something. I'm passing you I'm checking into a hotel, right, before I arrive. I'm passing you my reservation. I'm not doing that via a third party. I'm not doing that on email. I'm doing that over a private encrypted link, digital communication that is encrypted with our keys so that I know who you are and you know who I am and nobody else can snoop in. And I'm passing you cryptographically proven information. That is a big, big step forward. And just imagine how valuable those open, trusted, permissioned, permanent connections would be if they were underneath your hotel app and you were talking to your best customers, right? Or your airline app, you're talking to your best customers, right? And that you had the technology on top of that, that you could very easily pass my preferences and profile and information that is relevant and just the pieces that you need, right? And that's what we're talking about here. That's why this is a game changer. It's huge for travel and hospitality. It plays out in travel and hospitality really big. So I've done an awful lot of talking, and I'm just going to talk 20 seconds more because it's super important.
Yes.
And then I'll stop for a second. We talked about decentralized identifiers, DIDs, and we talked about verifiable credentials. And there is other technology as well in the play. But the important thing is to get something that is globally scalable, right? Something that works at a global scale, which is the intention here, right? It's absolutely essential that the technology definitions are standardized. So the data formats are standardized, the protocols are standardized and agreed. Otherwise, you don't get the scalability, because in the same way that the internet managed to expand because of standardized protocols, TCP and IP, and the web managed to be what it is today because of standardized protocol families, starting with HTTP, and mobile telephony is what it is today, where you can make a phone call and send data all around the world from your phone because of standardized protocols such as GSM, right? So this is the fourth inflection point. Those previous three were fundamental inflection points. We could have gone that way, but we didn't. We went this way, right? Each one of those was fundamental. Without those previous things happening, the world would look very different today. This is the fourth. This is the fourth, and it's time sequenced in importance, right? So TCP/IP, 10 years, HTTP, 10 years, GSM, 10 years, decentralized digital identity, right? It's very, very important. And that's why anybody who's interested in the next 10 years should be taking notice here. Because in travel and hospitality particularly, but across a broad spectrum of commercial activity that is increasingly online, increasingly digital, this capability is fundamental to the next wave of digital global e-commerce.
Yep. Wow, that's a lot to take in, Nick.